Although some call it meditation, it is in fact simply turning inwards, introversion. And I turn inwards with a very particular objective. Just as at school, I study law to become a lawyer, business to become a businessman, medicine to become a doctor. Here I enter the classroom inside, and I study the self in order to become the best possible me. And just like any study, I will need a good balance to be able to sustain it and even more to enjoy it. I need to be disciplined. I need to be honest. I need to be clear. And I need to be responsible. But I'll also need to be patient, understanding, forgiving, and keep it light. And that's why I come to a point now, a point of balance, because it is within me, the soul, that all the qualities I will need reside. I'm not an ordinary student of the self. I am a spiritual student because the self is spiritual, the soul. Balance comes naturally when I'm in a spiritual state of mind. I can be focused, concentrated, disciplined, honest, clear, but without a trace of violence. Because as a soul, my true nature is non-violent, peaceful. And so I always come inside to my inner classroom. And the first thing I do is sit myself in the awareness of being a soul. Just as in a physical school, one enters the room and sits at a desk, takes their seat. Here too, I take the seat of spirituality. And as long as I'm in that seat, my study will be healthy, without violence. Om Shanti.
Shanti, good evening and welcome to Interview with a Raj Yogi. Tonight's session is studying the self with a healthy attitude. And so we're listening to the commentary you were sharing about when there is that alignment of spirituality, a healthy attitude is very natural. So it sounds like even there's a prerequisite or there's already a foundation that's required to build up towards a healthy attitude. So someone who's new coming to Raja Yoga, where do they start then if you're asking to study about yourself?
It's an interesting thing. I've noticed that the students who come, and it's not to say, oh, well, then I might as well just give up now, but the students who come, it's almost as if the ones that do well have already been working a bit on this before they get here. And I think that's just something that happens, a pull in their life. But they do some self-work, preparatory work before, not realizing it will be useful for them when they embark on a spiritual study. Those ones do very well. So they've already developed a way of managing themselves internally, which is very a lot of self-efficacy, but without the violence. So that's one thing I've noticed. But if one hasn't done that preparatory work, and I had to choose one quality to cultivate, to focus on intentionally, it would be patience. Sometimes we refer to these Brahma Kumari centers, these Raj Yoga centers, as hospitals come universities. And I've always really, really liked that. There's a place where you become healthy as well as enriched, as well as develop wisdom. And it's not just study, but it's also healing. And when we talk about healing, one is a patient. So this is super important. The study part, I need to be focused, I need to be disciplined, but the healing part, I need to be a patient. So that's a wonderful place to focus for one's life in general, but especially when looking at transformation of the self. I need to be intentional and focused as a student, but in terms of healing, patient, patient, patient.
So how does one learn to be patient? Is it you mirror off of someone like your teacher, especially if it kind of sounds like like a chicken, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? If you learn some information, studying enables you to become patient. And there's a reason why I'm asking that question, but just wanted to see if you have any thoughts to share.
These days, I find myself looking at anyone around me with a lot of faith. This is one of the first things that we learn at the Raj Yoga Center, is that every human soul is intrinsically good. So a lot of faith that souls have the capacity to develop these qualities. And it doesn't necessarily need a good technique. It just needs, if you will, that faith, which sounds, I know, very flimsy. Today I was talking with a soul on the desk. Her first language is Eastern European, the Eastern European languages. But from the moment I've met her, I've found her English is remarkable. And I was telling her today, I said, wow, your English is so good. And she said, no, it's not. It's off. I said, no, it's really fantastic. And I realized that we're not always very supportive. And like our attitude isn't really on our side. And so I almost need to have an attitude of, I have the capacity to be patient. I know it sounds flimsy, but it's amazing the skills we develop at work. We have to. They kind of pull us out. So developing a skill set for spiritual practice, we actually all have the capacity to be patient. I need to have that faith or accept it and be intentional at using it. So we start to almost track, we use the word chart, but track, have that top of my mind as I go through the day. This is my objective. I'm going to cultivate patience. I'm driving the car. I start to notice I'm speeding up. My blood pressure is rising. Well, yeah, I'm working on patience. And it's amazing. The moment I actually say it to myself, it's as if it comes like some sort of servant. Suddenly, this patience shows up. We have the capacity, but we need to be intentional, use it, and this can so increase.
It feels like, I know you're saying maybe it sounds flimsy, but perhaps it's some, because one of the most important pieces in this study is you're returning back to your original self. Is that perhaps maybe one aspect of it is that you are recognizing something, so maybe it's not as flimsy as we think.
Yeah, I use the word flimsy. It's actually anything but flimsy. But we use that because these are not physical things. And we've got this attitude. It's not a fact, it's simply an attitude or opinion. But seeing is believing. And in this case, physically seeing is believing. Scientifically seeing is believing. Spirituality is kind of outside that scope, but I can still see, in a sense, understand. And we talked about that last week or in the last session. May not be last week for you if you weren't here. So it's a different way of approaching things. But yes, actually, the first thing that we again hear is that you are soul. That encompasses a lot of things. When we say you are soul, it includes the true nature of the soul, which is intrinsically good.
I find that very powerful, especially when you're sharing. It seems flimsy with respect to physicality. Everything's measured and scientific and you need proof. But, it seems like it's not relevant. But when you are sharing, it's common. I mean, I've worked with a lot of children, and you often hear, "I'm going to be a princess. I'm a princess," and there's and I realize it's nothing superficial. It's actually a certain kind of character they're talking about. Or they say, "I want to be an angel," or "I'm an angel." I mean, I had those thoughts when I was 16, right? But it's something much deeper, and I think in a subtle way, I was doubting that. Like, don't I have some basis of some knowledge? And I think in a way, I kind of sort of stopped, in a sense, having faith in myself. But what you're sharing about is, again, something much deeper.
And since you were sharing, you told the story, I'm not sure who did, but of children who seem to physically have certain disadvantages, if you, but they're not aware of them, it seems, or they're affecting how they see themselves. And so they say, I'm going to become this or that. And these so-called wise adults are questioning and planting doubt in self. Um, True school, taking me to her alma mater, her college, and I, I had this thought, it was just a pull that I'm going to go to this college. Don't know why, but there was just, I could feel that moment. It was quite deep, this feeling, I'm going to go to this college. Fast forward decades later, and suddenly I'm in depth there, and I'm where it comes to me, but it's amazingly powerful what a pure mind can do, what a pure heart can do. So it's outside the realm of science, but I think it's more powerful than science. In fact, I think in some ways science happens through spirituality, through the right attitude. I mean, I think about the things that have been invented, even flying in airplanes. Absolutely not to have that idea. And yes, they invented some mechanical things, but really it stood on vision. isn't a scientific or physical thing to have that kind of vision of flying. So spirituality kind of is the trailblazer for science, and we're trying to bring that back when it comes to the self, to have that faith and vision for the self and lead the way.
It's interesting that the conversation has come to this aspect, because prior to asking about this question, when you were sharing, I was thinking about love. If love plays a role, like loving or having an interest in what it is I'm studying, if it naturally creates a healthy attitude. But it feels like it adds a deeper element when it comes to something such as recognizing something that's deeper. Because when you say love, I'm not sure where souls will take where they will take it, but if you see a specific type of potential within yourself, it seems like, I don't know if it's a part of, just a natural alignment that happens.
Thing that does begin to happen, hopefully pretty soon in the spiritual studies, you start to rewrite your dictionary, because a lot of the words are going to be the same words that you hear in a secular context, and now using a spiritual context, and so having to kind of rewrite is love. And in spirituality, love equals attainment. So what's in it for me? I know that sounds business-like, but it pretty much is. So the way we operate. So what is the greatest attainment one can have? And we could answer with some physical and temporal things, but those are temporal. What the attainment that I carry with me through my life, and if you what is the greatest attainment? And it turns out it's in character stage. That's something that you will carry with you. It becomes the basis of your activity. And due to the law of karma, that's actually how we create everything else. The physical possessions in your life, everything are a result of your karmas, which are based on your character. So when we start to have a vision of releasing highest potential, true character, or that in my capacity as a spiritual being, it becomes quite interested. When it starts to develop, I think, a very healthy self sense, this attainment of my true character, this very high nobility operating.
There was someone who had mentioned, who was an athlete, a synchronized swimmer, and when she was younger, she had a certain particular type of attitude, and her coach would try to correct her, and she wouldn't take the correction, and she told her to get out of the water. And I know I'm just bringing this into a very brief summary, but you said something switched inside that soul, and I don't know if you know more any details, but the reason I was thinking about that, that what's going on inside that you can make such a dramatic change, because during the commentary, I was also thinking about, what if, again, for those who may not be aware, in Raja Yoga, we do take into account previous births, habits from previous births. And I was thinking about, what if one has a very militant attitude or a negative attitude, something that could create a barrier, but it sounds like, one can overcome that pretty quickly. Maybe some, not necessarily, maybe timing plays a role too. So just with respect to this soul, if it's relevant to this conversation to make such a change inside in terms of one's attitude.
So that's which makes because I know I'm told pizzas, but dances are really the essence of the theme. Makes studying the self unhealthy, very difficult. It is something we're all familiar with, which is ego. That makes it extremely uncomfortable. If there's a lot of arrogance, ego is very harsh taskmaster on the self, very unforgiving and punitive. So, example that was talking about, the term that we were exploring in the story was something called coachable, which means that you can be coached, or if you're corrected, and you'll actually take the correction. So what happened in the story This is an athlete, world-class athlete, and they have an excellent coach who isn't in some ways by so their status in the swimming world. Just real. She correction. Some correction because she didn't really. She wasn't interested in her status. She really just wanted to help her improve. She told her, this world-class athlete, get me done. You're done. Coaching is over. And she's like, no, I'm done. Class athlete. She says, no, I'm done. She's like, why? Because you're not coachable. She's like, why are you not coachable? She says, I'm repeatedly giving you the same correction and you haven't done it. You just said I can't, or I'm not interested, you haven't done it. She's like, she says, she says, okay, let me try one more time. And she goes back and coach notices her doing it again, and she gives her the correction. She doesn't do anything. The coach says, you're out of the water. You just did it again. And she realizes, gosh, I have been doing that. It's called self-respect, which is different from ego. So that's why we say you must become soul conscious in order to study or transform the self. Without self-respect, this will not be healthy. So that's the there's two students of this organization and transformed very quickly and reclaimed their original, very, very elevated state of being very fast. Why? Because they were humble, they were egoless, which means they had self-respect. If there's self-respect, it's very, very healthy. Without it, it's very, very painful. So how can I get that self-respect? Soul consciousness.
Well, if anything that inspires those who are taking the course to really examine the basis of why I'm actually in this study. But perhaps for those who haven't taken the course, very refreshing that this isn't just like anything that you've studied out there. So, but we really should have a little reflection. Shanti.
It's nice to have when implementing any change in my life, especially in a spiritual shift, is to ask the self, why am I doing this? Why do I want to embark on this change? Is it to impress someone else? Or is it to secure some temporary gain? Or is it really coming from the heart that I really want to develop myself, not to impress anyone or to gain anything externally, but completely for the self, for my own happiness? What will I attain just for the self through doing this change? Taking the time, being patient to have that conversation with the self, because that conversation will sustain me as I move along my journey of change, especially when things become a little challenging. It's nice to remember why I'm doing this. Om Shanti.
Shanti. Thank you, Judy. And thank you for those online. At least I know there's some modifications and revisions I want to make in terms of my own personal study of Raja Yoga. And so, just a reminder that Inner Freedom is sold out, but there is a wait list. However, there are many on that wait list. But if you're interested, Edmonton, 3 hours away, there is Inner Freedom. So if you want to go to the Edmonton website is brahmakumaris.ca/Edmonton. And so you'll be able to find the information there if you're interested. In terms of the next Learn About Meditation, that's taking place on August 30th. It's the last Saturday of the month, 12:15 to 1:30 at the Academy. Again, we have our drop-in sessions on the Thursdays at the Academy at 6:30 to 7 o'clock. Drop-in English practical meditation happening at the Inner Peace Center on the Mondays, and Hindi meditation on the Wednesdays. Again, those are all 6:30 to 7:30 at the Inner Peace Center, just to make it consistent for souls. And of course, we always have World Meditation Hour on site in Hindi at Inner Peace Center, third Sunday of the month, but online for English, third Sunday of the month. Lots of other sessions are also being posted for the Raja Yoga courses. So please, we will be updating the website pretty soon. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Thank you for joining. Om Shanti.